Hello, everybody, and welcome to ToutSuite Social Club on the road. We're at the Stephen Kent Winery in Livermore, California. I'm Stephen Mirassou, chief dishwasher and broom pusher here at the Stephen Kent Winery, and I'm with my wife, June Mirassou, here bringing you Livermore Valley perspective on Chardonnay and an ode and a celebration of my grandmother Merrillie's life. We've got a live studio audience here at the Stephen Kent Barrel Room. Say hello, everybody. It's a beautiful thing to see so many friends here at the winery, tasting through the flight of wines that we're going to taste through and talk about, and also family and friends. We're a small group here, and it's all about communing with each other and having wine sort of be that vehicle for sharing memories and gluing the family together. So I'm very excited about everyone being here. We're going to have a lot of fun tonight, guys. And cake at the end, too. So that's if you don't like the wines, at least we have cake. I should tell everybody, in case my wife comes across as being a little nervous, which should be dispelled in about the first 15 seconds. She was pulled up on stage here at the very end. Didier came down with a case of wine gout or something like that, and can't be on camera. He's back there tweeting and drinking as I speak now, though. And we're happy to have him here. Susan Quinn, thank you so much for being here. We're very excited about being here, kind of home winery advantage, as it were. We've been to Napa several times at the studio to talk about what's happening in Livermore Valley, all the exciting things that are going on, but it's great being here. And it's great to talk about the family, to talk about winemaking, to talk about Livermore Valley, and that's what we're going to do tonight. Merrillie Mirassou is my grandmother and is the person who we named our first Chardonnay and only Chardonnay after back in 1999. In fact, everyone here has the first vintage. We're tasting the first vintage of Chardonnay going back to 1999 from the Folkend Vineyard, our first vineyard site here in Livermore. And June's going to give us a perspective on Merrillie's life as we move through what we're doing. But I just sort of a quick couple of words about my feeling about what wine really is there for. We work hard in the vineyard. We work hard in the cellar. But what it really comes down to is making something that brings people together, making something that people celebrate beginnings and ends with. Births, memorials, celebrations for loved ones that aren't with us anymore. Wine is one of those things that really is the glue for the social interactions that we have. Quality is a very nebulous thing in a lot of ways. What I may like, my wife may not like. What she likes, I might not like. She's shaking her head. It's really about, though, what wine makes you feel. And that's, I think, what's important about any life experience is how emotionally connected can we get with something, whether it's winemaking, whether it's children growing up, whether it's your oldest child getting married, whether it's kids going off to Europe for half a year and you won't see them for 6 months. All of these things are really important. And I think that to the extent that wine is really important is where it fills in those emotional gaps and where it, again, kind of glues us all together. You want to show that first picture, June?
So this is, I love this picture. We unearthed this recently. We have a box of old photos. Norb, his grandfather, fourth generation. Mirassou, was an avid photographer and videographer, and we have just a small sampling of what he took. But this picture, and that's probably why the quality of this, hopefully you can see a little bit better there, was about, back in the day, they have these albums that they have like what looks like a postage stamp size. So trying to blow it up is a little bit difficult. But this was one of the little treasures that we unearthed, and it's Merrillie as a, I don't know how old she would be, maybe 3 months, 4 months with her parents. And I love the what is the song? The Surrey with the Fringe on the Top.
This may have had an actual motor, I think, but it's the same kind of thing, I think.
So if you don't know, I am a total history geek. So when Stephen gave me that box and I got to unearth the family history, it was amazing. So I've been on Ancestry.com. If any of you have been on that, I uncovered quite a lot about the family that they had no idea.
That's for sure. I did know, one of the things about the early family, for the Mirassou family, of which I'm one of the sixth generation, and really the only one kind of involved in the wine business at this point in time, is that you get the Mirassou family history. Kind of get spoon-fed this history of the oldest winemaking family in the country. Pierre Pellier, my great-great-great-grandfather, came to San Jose in 1854 and brought Pinot Noir, the first Pinot Noir cuttings, brought Mourvedre, brought the first French prune, which, if you liked prunes back in the day in Santa Clara County, these were an amazing cash crop back in the 30s and 40s. What we don't get, though, as kind of family members, is the non-Mirassou side of things. And it's unfortunate because there's a lot of great value, and some would argue even more value in the non-Mirassou side of the family lineage, as it were. Merrillie Chardonnay, half Irish, half Italian.
Julia Maloney.
Julia Maloney.
Can't get much more Irish than that.
Julia Maloney and my grandpa Popeye, who was Bill Landucci. And when I grew up, I can remember going over to my great-grandparents' house, and my great-grandfather had been a butcher, and there are family pictures of him in his butcher shop, and it was an amazing thing to see, beef for 10 cents a pound kind of a thing. It was oysters, half a dozen oysters for 5 cents kind of a thing. Prices have changed a lot since then, but they were some of the nicest people that I've ever met. I remember them very distinctly, being a tiny kid at the time, and it's fun to be able to kind of unearth the sides of family that you don't really know about, that kind of get overshadowed by the marketing family, as it were. And whether it's my mother's side or my maternal grandfather's father's side, it's amazing to see.
So if you don't know the family history, we never met Merrillie. Unfortunately, she passed away very early at 33 years old. My father-in-law was only 10, I think, when she passed away. So we never met her. Norb Mirassou remarried, and that's his wife that we met. But in her short years on this earth, she was quite a remarkable woman. So we've been going back and forth on Ancestry.com. We've been going back and forth about what her actual birth date is, because the census just tells you how old they were when they came to the house to, take the census. You don't know exactly. July 20, we know definitively because I found in that box the actual birth announcement. July 26, 1918, she was born. She's the only child of Julia and Popeye Landucci, and she was, although if you see in the picture, she looked very girly. She did a lot of dance recitals and liked to dress up, but apparently she was a bit of a tomboy, and she had a little bit of a mischievous streak in her. And her nickname was actually Willie or Billy. They hardly ever called her Merrillie when she was little, because Dad's name was William, but he didn't go by William. He went by Popeye, I guess, and she was Willie or Billy. Their only child there. They didn't have boys, so they called their daughter.
I was going to say, it's not wish fulfillment or anything like that, I don't suspect. One thing, have you guys tasted the wine already? Just like when we do winemaker dinners, don't let my talking stop you from enjoying.
Yeah.
Okay, so please taste.
I always tell people when we go to winemaker dinners, don't wait until Stephen stops talking. At Thanksgiving, do not wait to just eat and he'll talk.
I'm trying to work off the calories ahead of time, I think. So just to get kind of move to the wine part of this discussion, and we'll do this with each successive vintage that we're talking about. 1999 would have been our third vintage of Cabernet. So we started the Stephen Kent Winery back in 1996 as Cabernet producers from a little vineyard over my left shoulder, about a mile and a half, is the Full Kent Vineyard in the Livermore Valley. And it was a site that was farmed by a couple who were ex-Livermore Lab folks who were on their way to retirement. And we bought fruit from them starting in '96. And the Cabernet was very well received. And in '99, we started doing Chardonnay. My dad and I started the Stephen Kent Winery with an idea of doing one great wine from Livermore, one great red wine Cabernet from Livermore. But there was a really cool Chardonnay vineyard on the same property, so we decided after some time that if folks like Cabernet, they're probably going to like Chardonnay as well. So we made our first vintage of Chardonnay in 1999, and we have, I think, now 5 bottles left or something like that, 4, 3, whatever it is, two after 9. There was I can't remember who it was, but who said about aged wine. There are no great vintages. There are great bottles, however. When wine kind of gets its age, we're 1999. What are we, 15 years ago? So this is a 15-year-old Chardonnay that we're tasting now, which people have this idea that for whatever reason that Chardonnay won't age, that it needs to be consumed immediately, and if you don't, then a year later it's going to be over the hill. But I think when Chardonnay is made well and made in a balanced fashion, that you're going to get a wine that ages well. Acidity is a great aging characteristic for wine. And there was a lot of acid in the 99 vintage. It was a cool vintage. 2000 was a much warmer year, but 99 was a very cool year. In fact, we had no Cabernet in 1999 because of weather issues and the like, but we had, I thought, a nice crop of Chardonnay. And so that's what we have in this first glass. What do you all think of that? You guys like it?
So Merrillie converted me to Chardonnay. I was an anti-Chardonnay person. I think Chardonnay is over-oaked most of the time, and it just hits you over the head, and it's too thick and unctuous. And the balance in this wine from the very beginning is the first time that I actually said, oh, well, maybe I do like Chardonnay, because there's the acid to balance out the oakiness of it. My mom, she wants the big Napa, hit you over the head,
cork,
wood bottle.
not cork, doesn't really matter. Never a bottle that goes to waste.
And I really like Chardonnay, but I love Merrillie.
So it's intriguing for me to see. One of the things that's neat about being a winemaker is that you get to exist sort of in this constant plane of past, present, and future. We're talking right now, we're just about to bottle 2012 wines, vintage wines, which will be released next year. We're just about to release 2011 wines, including lineage, later in the year. So that's kind of the present for me, although it's really kind of the past as well. These are wines that are, have been put to bed, as it were. They kind of await the wine lover's sort of final critique, as it were. But we also get a chance to look at the present and to look at what's happening down the road with the 13th vintage and the like. So it's exciting to see all of these different planes of time and different ripening arcs, all these really cool things that are related to time and circles and the like with wine, which is a constantly intriguing leitmotif for me, as it were.
And it was this. I didn't know who Merrillie was until this vintage. Really, it was. Do you remember who decided to name it Merrillie?
I think it was my father.
He was. As we go through the pictures and we talk more about her, she was apparently a much larger than life person, and of an incredibly loving mom. In fact, the first, if you guys, when you came in, if you saw the boards, I made those our first year. How many of you were here the first year? Any of you here the first year when we were? Yeah. If you remember that, we had, and as I mentioned earlier, Norb was not just a avid photographer, but also loved to take movies back in the. Who did that back in that day? There's all these 8mm film of. He wants to move on.
No, I'm going to be drinking out of this at the end.
So,
be a multi-vintage blend.
Anyway, as I was saying, in that first release, I was kind of, because I'm kind of a family historian, I was the one that was in charge of coming up with the kind of historical background of that, and I pieced together those pictures of her that, I mean, she just leaps out on the camera. There's something about her that she's just such. We have these pictures, these class photos of her. She went to Lowell School, elementary school in San Jose, and then Notre Dame High School. We have all those class pictures, and I sent them to Tracy and to Susan, and Tracy's like, well, okay, who? Because there doesn't say, like, now on the bottom it tells you who's who. So which one is her? But within 30 seconds, there's something about her. She just pops out on the screen in front of you. She was an amazing person, and it's she lived a very full 33 years. It was really sad that she died so young, but I mean, she was an extraordinary person.
We're pouring the 2003 vintage Chardonnay now, which marks kind of a transition for the brand in that we were doing sort of filtered Chardonnay for the first few years, and 2003 was our first unfiltered Chard. And if you want to hold that picture up, June,
if you were here in the beginning, you remember this. This is the card that went with it.
Picture we used for the label for the wine. And many people said, she looks like Meryl Streep, and there was an interesting kind of resemblance to her, but also more interesting that the family took time to do these kinds of really intricate photographs. They were these real posed kind of pictures, and even more importantly, I think, and I wish I could do this, but she really fills the screen. She really fills that frame and compels you to sort of look at her, which is an amazing quality to have as a person. And
I mean, there are hundreds of those little postage stamp pictures on those albums of her, and she looks like a movie star. I mean, she looks like she was born to be on screen, and yet she was apparently really down to earth and a little bit wicked in her sense of humor, and I could see why when Norv met her. So in this picture, I think she's about 16 years old. She was still doing dance recitals and theater, and we have in that box also, apparently they went to the theater a lot because she saved all those old programs and I'm like, are you in this? No, I just saved it. So I guess we have a certain connection because I'm the same way. I like to save history.
Anybody have any questions, any comments? Get some audience feedback here. Didier.
Well, why did you go in 2003 into Unfine and Unfiltered?
Good question.
It's a good question. I think it's something we've always tried to achieve. We've always tried to be as non-interventionist as we can be from a winemaking standpoint, and texture for me is the most important thing. Even more important than flavor and aroma is the way the wine feels in the mouth. It's the way the wine kind of takes this really cool journey. I was telling somebody, I can't remember exactly who it was, about the way I try to taste, and it was sort of this, my mouth is kind of this stream, this river, and the wine is the boat, and acid is kind of how fast the river moves, and tannin is sort of the rocks that are in the river. And so when I'm tasting wine, I'm trying to, I kind of imagine just naturally sort of this journey through my mouth, and I want length, I want acid, I want this vibrancy, and I want texture. I want a sense of this kind of mouth-filling quality to the wine that works really well with all the other aspects, whether it be tannin for big red wines or acidity for white wines. And I always felt that unfiltered wine, if the wine was made well and stored well and carefully maintained, you really didn't need to filter it. It was more an issue of, if I've got a problem, I filter so no one else has a problem down the road. And if I don't have a problem and don't need to filter, then why do it? Because it robs, I think, the wine of a little bit of that texture, a little bit of that sense of fullness in the mouth. So that's kind of why we went to a regimen of not filtering anything if we could get away with it. And that's been the way that we've progressed down the road here. You all kind of like that quality? Not enough wine, guys. You were much noisier in real life. Don't be Cindy Brady. The red light's not on you guys. Any other questions, comments from anybody out there and about why we do what we're doing, why Chardonnay is important to
I got a quick question. When you make Chardonnay, does the wine stay on the skin for a long period of time? On the like the Merrillie?
So red wines get to be red because they're fermented on the skin, and white wines generally are pressed off right away. So what happens? We bring Chardonnay fruit into the winery. The fruit goes right into the press. So we press off to a stainless steel tank, and then eventually it goes to barrels. So what you're probably thinking of is the wine is on the lees for a long time. So it's the yeast cells and the other particulate matter that's there, but it's not contact with the skins. It's contact with the yeast, and as the yeast are there to ferment the wine, right? They're there to get rid of sugar and produce alcohol and carbon dioxide. And once the yeast cells die, their contribution isn't done yet. As the cell bodies of these single cell fungi basically break apart as they're being stirred, they give over texture, flavors. Think of like fresh baked bread, think of biscuits, think of those kinds of aromas and flavors. That's what surly aging on the lees gives to Chardonnay. It also gives a sense of texturally gives a sense of roundness and a sense of fullness to the mouthfeel also. Wines, unoaked Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, those wines generally aren't on the lees all that long, so you get more crisp acid, but less sort of mouth-filling kind of texture. First vintages of Merrillie on the lees for anywhere from 12 to 18 months, so quite a while. I think as the wines age, you see more and more of that kind of quality coming out in the wine. And think of champagne. Champagne's on the lees for years and years and years and years, and that's what gives great champagne that's kind of bready, not bretty, but bready quality.
That's what I was wondering because, I can't believe 15-year-old Chardonnay tastes that good with a nice acid balance. But I was wondering why. Is it because I know they were aged on oak quite a while? Was it the oak or the lees? But that's what I was really getting at.
That's the leesiness is probably the most. What I would hope would be the thing you'd get most. Oak is a great tool to have. Oak is a tool that we all use for the most part. Some will choose to use neutral oak or oak that's older. Some will use a lot of new oak. I'm trying to make balanced wines. I'm trying to make wines that have layers of complexity and nuance that will give you a sense of, wow, I don't know what to expect from the next sip kind of thing. And every time I take another sip, it's something different. It's a new experience. It's a broader experience. I don't want to bludgeon anybody. We're trying to make beautiful, elegant wines here in Livermore.
But I'm going to interject for a minute because you're talking about the barrels and stuff. I didn't realize. I read the tasting notes. I'm now working in the tasting room part-time on, a couple weekends a month. So come by and say I love you. But we just released the latest Collector Circle wine, which is a Syrah. And we had been pouring, this is called Birch Parade, 100% Syrah from Gilmedi Vineyard. There's a previous release, also 100% Syrah called Social Gathering, and I was like, when I first tasted the new release, I'm like, why is this so different than the other ones? He made the wines by the way. So I went back and I looked at the the spec sheets of the two of them, and in the earlier one, the Social Gathering, it was like 60-something% new oak and 30-something% second use oak, and it was the reverse for the second one, and also there was half American, half French, and Hungarian. It was like this mixture of French, Hungarian, and American oak in the older one, and then all American oak in the second one. And it was a dramatically different wine. It's the same grapes coming from the same vineyard, but that's the influence of the oak. And that was like, kind of hit me. This just happened on Sunday. I had this light bulb. Oh, I guess really it does make a difference what barrels you use and whether they're used or they're from Hungary or France.
My dartboard wasn't working that second time around or whatever. No, but the influence of oak with Chardonnay. Chardonnay is one of those things. It's funny. There used to be this sort of ABC crowd, right? Anything but Chardonnay. There was this. Chardonnay became sort of this generic name for a white wine people would order at a bar. right? I'll take a Chardonnay. Didn't matter who Chardonnay, didn't matter where it was from. And the grape, I think, suffered from the fact that it became this commodity in a lot of ways. There are a lot of folks out there who love Riesling who will argue with this comment, but in my mind, Chardonnay is the greatest white grape that there is. And because of that, it will gain a lot of adherence if the Chardonnay styles are the right kind of styles, or to show the fruit off and show this great balance and opulence off. But it also can lead to people dissing the variety and saying, I'm never going to drink Chardonnay because the wines are over-oaked, or they're manipulated too much, or they're sweet, or what have you. But it's one of those varieties that is a great expression of where it's grown, kind of like Pinot Noir, grown in the same areas that Pinot Noir is grown historically. So it shows where it's grown very, very much, and also shows very deeply sort of the winemaker's influence on the wine. How much oak you used, what yeast you used to ferment, how long you're on the lees, all these sorts of things, which are tools and are responsibilities of the winemaker to make sure that you're doing it in a balanced fashion, in my opinion. And that's kind of where.
Where is this vineyard? I don't know.
So DeMayo, this is an interesting thing too. Thank you for bringing that up. DeMayo Vineyard. So Folk Kent Vineyard was the first vineyard we used, Greenville Road. DeMayo Vineyard was just up the street. So it was a secondary source we used when we couldn't get Folk Kent fruit anymore. And we used it for a couple of years, and it was a different clone of Chardonnay. We used a Wente clone Chardonnay for the first release, and now that's where we are again with Wente clone Chardonnay. And the Wente clone Chardonnay is a story in and of itself, and leads to sort of a discussion about the origin of Chardonnay in California and how important it is as a variety in California, and something that we'll get to, I think, with the next wine. Are we nearing that point? So we're going to move on. Any other questions or comments about, yeah?
Sure. What's your position on cork versus screw top? It's not specifically the wine, but
to the right and high. That's a great question. I wish I had the courage to do everything in screw cap. The first thing that wine ought to be, Harry Waugh, who was a great British wine writer, said the first responsibility of all wine is to be red. And I have a lot of sympathy for that point of view. But I think the first responsibility of all wine is to be drinkable, is to be unflawed. And the screw cap gives winemakers and consumers this beautiful tool to use to prevent TCA contamination, corked wine. It gives the winemaker an opportunity to put in the bottle what he or she intended to have put in the bottle. Not something that's going to be totally, can I say screwed over? Totally screwed over by a piece of bark that doesn't work right. That is contaminated with trichloroanazole, which is a component that is created by the use of chlorine to clean corks, to process corks, and certain bacteria. So that's where that corked wine problem comes from. And the estimates differ, but I think that used to be anywhere from 5 to 8% of bottles out there were corked.
And it's so disappointing. You've all experienced it. If you're wine drinkers, you've experienced it where you had the special bottle of wine that you set aside for something, and you pull it out, and you open it up, and it's corked. That's one really horrible thing that can happen. For us, worse than that is if you give somebody a bottle of your wine and they haven't tasted it, and that's the first taste or the only taste that they're going to get of that wine is a corked bottle. And
I'm sorry. Holy cow. That was just like home. Pay no attention to that. Pay no attention to that spill.
So I'm just going to, a little aside. We worked the release on Saturday. Were you guys, any of you there on Saturday when so I don't know what session it was, but Stephen was in the back opening a bottle of wine and the cork broke inside. So he tried to poke it through, and it literally splashed up at him, and it filled his shirt with red. This was a red wine. This was not Chardonnay.
Don't try this at home.
And I'm like, where? Because he left me alone for like 10, 15 minutes at that table. I'm like, where are you? He was like, wine away.
Wine away works.
I told him he should have taken a before and after picture because it would have been like the best. You could have sold it to the company and made a ton of money. Because he sprayed it and then blew dry his shirt and you could not tell that he had spilled like
Presto
probably
changeo.
15. Not that you've ever spilled wine before or ever will again. It was an anomaly.
Trying hard not to. Trying hard not to. But screw caps are something that the jury's out a little bit in terms of ageability. The Australians would say we've had wine in a screw cap for 40 years and the wines taste beautifully, so there's really no argument for them. But in California, there's not a lot of history yet for wines under higher end wines under screw cap for any length of time. But this is something that I'm really keen on trying, and as I said before, I would much rather fight the kind of sort of the marketing battle of the kind of the sort of sense that only low end wines are packaged in screw caps, and have someone get a beautiful bottle of lineage every time, than the opposite.
But we don't really know, right? We don't know with wines that are aged for a long time. That's the part of the problem is we don't really know what would happen to that wine if you put it down for a long time.
There's a paradigm shift. I mean, people are used to the idea of what Cabernet is going to do, let's say, with a cork and how it's going to age, but we don't know how it's going to age with the screw cap.
Right.
So from that perspective, it's still a challenge, but something we're looking at doing. With
Could you do like a case or something, screw cap, and see what happens?
We can. I'm working on that too. I am working on trying to do a small little project so we know kind of where we stand with things, because ultimately, when our friends and our neighbors, our club members, our family are buying wine and they're celebrating special occasions with that, the worst thing in the world is to have a wine that's corked. It's just it's no bueno, as they say at the winery.
Is that what they say?
Moving on to the third wine.
Can I ask one real quick
Sure,
follow-up?
absolutely.
What would that 99 taste like if it had a screw cap on it, in your
That's
opinion?
a really good question. I think the 99 tastes a lot more like 2008 does. I think you'd see a lot more fresh fruit. You'd see less development of certain aromatics, I think, like the leesy quality and the wood, whatever wood notes you do get from the wine, you would see less of that. I think dissolved oxygen in the wine, and its ability to kind of move through the cork affects kind of the way that the wines tend to show some more subtle aromas and flavors when you open the wine. And with a relatively impermeable, not completely impermeable, but relatively impermeable metal seal, you would get less development that way. Fresher wine, maybe not as interesting. Some would say the 99 is over the hill, and maybe it is. Certainly, I think that it's one of those kind of catch-as-catch-can kind of things with the bottles. Again, great bottles, but not great vintages when the wines are 15 years old. But it would be interesting to know. Yeah. We'll have to do that, though. Maybe my grandkids can tell me how it all tasted at the end.
So we're on
wine
2008.
2008.
So we've moved to the Landucci block.
Landucci block. So Landucci, Merrillie's maiden name, celebrating her Italian and Irish heritage, or at least her Italian heritage via the name Landucci. And you want to hold up that.
So this is their wedding picture.
So moving on to the fourth generation, and it's funny. This is a beautiful picture, and my grandmother is a beautiful woman with a great deal of style and personality. And there's another picture I've taken certainly that same day within a half hour of her and her parents, and neither of her parents are smiling.
They look like they're being led to the gallows.
Yes, they look like. God, why'd they marry that French winemaker? hey, well, French-American winemaker. Present company excluded.
When I met Stephen, first of all, he was never going to be in the wine business. So if you don't know our story, we met at 18 years old, freshman in college. My parents told me I can go anywhere I want to go to college, but it can't be west of the Mississippi because then I'll meet somebody who is from the West Coast, and I'll marry them, and I'll move away. So I went to Washington, D.C., to George Washington University, and I met Stephen in my freshman year. He was in 504, and I was in 508 and Thurston Hall, and so we've known each other a really, really long time. That's why I want to go out.
It's amazing.
But I might, your parents' best effort to stop you from doing things isn't going to work. So, so when I met him, no way. He's majoring in lit. He goes to NYU and got his master's in literature. He's never going to be in the family business. We moved in
2002 back to California.
No, you're way off.
No,
what are you talking about?
92.
92. So I was actually pregnant with Catherine, our third, and I lied to my parents and didn't tell them because I knew they would be crushed if we were having their third grandchild in California, so I didn't tell them until we got to California. So I know because she was born in 93, so we moved in July.
10 years off. Come on,
it was going to be a 2-year, maybe 3-year move. We were going to get to know his family, and then the siren song of the Mirassou family in the vineyard came, and he has been in the business ever since.
Thank God.
That's how that all went down.
Oh,
but yeah. But when I met him, I was told that he, I think you told me you were more, people think Mirassou is a French name, but he was more Italian than he was French because, as far as he knew, right, Landucci married Mirassou, so we have Italian and French, and Mom was Sanseri, which is Sicilian, and Bernatus, which she swore was English or Irish or something she didn't know. So fast forward about around this time, 99, I started digging into the family history. Bernatus is it's Bernadas. It's an incredibly old French name. They are some of the earliest. His mom's side of the family has been here since like 1634. They were in Canada and, Louisiana. He's a son of the American Revolution. I mean, no. He's more French than anything. Mom was mistaken.
That's why I have such a kinship with Didier. That and the gin and tonics, I think.
It's very cool. Actually, Mom's side is and that's kind of the sad thing is the Mirassou family as much like that's the famous part of the family. Okay, so I'm going to call you out on this. When we were in college, Hannah and Her Sisters, the Woody Allen movie, came out, and we were friends at that time, not dating. We went to the movies, and we're watching Hannah and Her Sisters, and there's a scene where they're having their family dinner, and there's a wine bottle on the table, and I'm trying to listen to the movie, and he's in full voice saying, "That's Mirassou. That's a Mirassou bottle on the table." I'm like, shut up, I want to hear the movie. But apparently they were pouring Mirassou.
They were. They were. And I think my father still worked for the family winery at the time, so I could take credit for part of that anyway.
I had to watch the movie again to find out what happened during that thing.
Nothing important. People died, that kind of thing.
People died.
There's a lot of family gets sort of intertwined in a lot of interesting and wonderful families that get created as you're in this kind of business, any family business. And I have a lot of great people that I work with, have been working with for how many years, Jennifer?
100 years. It just feels like
that. It feels like 100 for Jennifer. It's 17 or 18. Where you create these lifelong relationships and you see each other at your best and your worst. And I try to, for the folks who come here, our club members, our friends who come here, I try to at least be mediocre, if not great, on an ongoing basis. Again, kind of getting back to what I said in the very beginning, it's about sharing, right? It's about having something that binds you, that creates a shared experience, create this emotional quality, emotional quotient to all of our relationships. That I don't want to go through life doing it any other way. We not that we ever had a chance necessarily to be a million case a year winery, but that would be kind of hell for me, I think, is to sort of be involved in a business where it was all about how many pallets did you move, as opposed to, how do we grow together with these wines? We have folks, the Mises, in fact, from the earliest vintages of Chardonnay, we're here 15 years later talking about the same wine that we introduced to each other, way back in the day, and it's a really cool thing to kind of revisit what that all means, from not only from a business standpoint and being very interested in seeing how what you make holds up or doesn't hold up in certain cases, but also more importantly from that emotional component that is something that continues to motivate me to do better and better and better and to share more and more and more.
So we have 4 kids. I alluded to that. Catherine was the one that was born right after we moved here, and then we had Sarah not long after that. And people have said, do you know how that happens? You do know how that happens, right? Because we had them about 18 months apart. So that's what I've been doing, in case you're wondering, the last however many years, 19 plus years, is raising 4 kids. And not to say that Stephen hasn't been, but I have just started working at the winery in the last couple of months, and it's really amazing for me to see the family that has been created here. It's something that I come home when I work a shift. I come home and I tell you all the time is, the people that work here and the people that come here. It feels like I have this extended family. There's an amazing culture to this winery, and that's all a testament to what you guys have built together.
It's an amazing privilege. Anybody with questions or comments? Or
well,
sure.
I guess
Sorry.
now I have both a comment and a question.
Okay.
First of all, the comment is we do feel like your extended family.
Absolutely.
You make us feel part of that, and it's our favorite place to come and taste wine. So that's my comment.
Thank you.
But now my question is, I'm looking at 2008. Tell us about 2008. 94 cases produced. What happened?
What up with that?
Was it? There was less for us to drink. I mean, was it a bad? What happened?
Were you punishing your children? What happened there?
What was that? I'm trying to answer.
Is it missing a zero?
We had 2 instances two versions of the rate. Wholesale one and small one.
Got it.
So this is a small lot.
So
Because it's really, really good, by
Thank
the way.
you. So we were asked why such a small production in 2008, 94 cases, and we have been sort of trying to play the wholesale game with Chardonnay and with Cabernet for that matter, and we had a wine that was different for the club members and for the folks at the winery than we had for the larger world. And the wine we're pouring tonight is what we poured for our tasting room folks, and so that's kind of where volume considerations come in is trying to do something that's special for the folks who've learned about Livermore Valley. Where's the first? Okay, segue into a question. Let me adjust. Michael.
So first off, you raised a great son that works here. So
Thank you.
So that's your best vintage.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Indeed. Thank you.
The second thing, how much secondary malolactic fermentation goes into the various years?
Every year that we've done has been 100% mallow. So and there's a couple different ways of looking at that. So malolactic fermentation is a secondary fermentation process for all wines that go through mallow. All red wines, for the most part, go through mallow. And if you want to make a certain style of Chardonnay, it'll go through malolactic fermentation as well. Primary fermentation is yeast oriented, right? Yeast eat sugar, create alcohol. The secondary fermentation is a bacterial fermentation. And the bacteria that we inoculate, and it can happen spontaneously, but we inoculate, convert malic acid, so that tart green apple acid, into lactic acid, a dairy acid. So you get a wine that is more stable because all the food is gone now. So there's nothing there to feed bad bugs that might be there. But it also gives you a wine that's rounder in the mouth, has some of those, could be buttery notes, but more about texture, roundness, and that sort of thing. We go through 100% malolactic fermentation in the sense that we go down to certain parts per million where we consider the wines to be dry. The other way of doing it would be to have part of your blend go through malolactic and part not, and you blend them back together so you've gone through 50% malolactic, for instance, so you've got a wine with a little bit more crisp acid, but also some of that round characteristic. So that would be kind of how you get a non-100% mallow wine, or if it stops early for some reason, which could happen as well. But we try to get a wine to go through dry from a malolactic standpoint, and all of our chards have been 100% ML and dry. That allows us to do a wine that's unfiltered. If it weren't dry, we'd have to filter it because there's still stuff there that can feed things that we don't want to feed, basically. And thank you very much for the comment on the sun. Appreciate that.
Your mini-me.
My mini-me. So we're going to move on to 2012 Chardonnay. Is there any other comments or questions about the 2008? So my question to all of you out there is, first varietally labeled Chardonnay came from where? The first varietally labeled Chardonnay came from which appellation? Which winery? Livermore Valley. Excellent. Napa, no. Wrong. Wrong. Livermore Valley. First varietally labeled Petit Syrah came from where, Didier? Napa? No. Came from Livermore too. Thanks for playing though. You're awesome. Chardonnay. So back the way things work in the European world is wines get named after a place. So you have Burgundy, you have Bordeaux. In Italy, you have Chianti, you have Barolo, you have Barbaresco. In the U.S., wines were labeled after places that didn't exist in the U.S., like Mountain Chablis, or some of the other Gallo wines that were named for places that fruit didn't come from. It wasn't really until the Wentys started the process back prior to Prohibition, and then shortly thereafter with the Concannon and Petit Syrah, that you would get wines named after the variety, after the grapes that they were made from. So you would get this premium put on the grape and the variety, not on the place, which is an interesting kind of way that the California wine industry grew. But Livermore really is the heart of California Chardonnay in a lot of ways. The Wente clone of Chardonnay, you take a cutting, a bud from a Chardonnay vine, and you propagate that bud onto a trunk of a vine someplace else. That fruiting part of that vine will have the same genetic quality, 100% genetically identical to the bud that it came from, to the plant that it came from. That's why it's called the clone. So you transfer the DNA from one plant to another plant, and you get that same quality. Ultimately, over time, though, the place and the winemaker will trump the clonal aspect of the wines. But what's important is that the first great Chardonnay grown in California was grown in Livermore Valley. And up until about 20 years ago or so, 25 years ago, most of the Chardonnay grown in California was Wente clone Chardonnay. So Livermore, as the more I learn, the more I make wine in Livermore, the more I know and find out that this really is the absolute center of wine in the U.S. in terms of quality, in terms of impact on other regions. And the Landucci block is an old Wente clone block grown about I'm pointing frontwards, about a mile west of where I'm sitting right now. And this is where we've gotten fruit for the 2012 Chardonnay, which is kind of gives you an idea, everybody out there, sort of the differences between a brand new Chardonnay and what doesn't exist there in terms of aromas and flavors and concentration of those things, but what does exist there in terms of acidity and freshness of fruit and the like. So there's, for me, a really neat chance to kind of get the whole history of Stephen Kent Winery in terms of the wine aspect of things, Chardonnay aspect of things, and share it with you all.
So why, I'm just looking at the tasting notes here, why you went, all the other ones it's 100% new French oak, this one is French and American, and then you have 60% new and 40% used in this particular vintage versus the other ones. What does that do for the wine?
Well, there is, so the mixture of woods, the different aromas and flavors and textures you're going to get from the different barrels are hopefully going to all add up to something amazing at the end. I look at barrels the same way I look at a spice rack. I'm trying to build complexity in my wines based upon not only where the origin of the wood, which forest in France, for instance, or where in America I got barrels, or where in Hungary, but also how they're toasted, what age they are, and all of these things are brought to bear in the blending end of things. So we want to create a lot of raw material to make something that's really complex at the end. We don't want to add too much salt or too much pepper or too much cumin or what have you, but we want to have those things at hand in order to put them together to make this really cool thing.
Is this a reflection of a difference in your feelings about what Chardonnay should taste like, or was it just that wine made more sense to have that?
I think that some of these wines, the vintage kind of sort of showed us with the fruit on the vine and the way it was tasting, where we ought to go with things. And I'm working toward an ideal in my head that I haven't quite articulated yet in the bottle, but I'm moving in that direction, and I have a kind of a specific idea in my mind what that means, but I don't want to share it until I've actually made it, and then I can say I told you so. And you'll remember that.
If any of you have seen Stephen during the harvest, I call myself a harvest widow every year. There's about 3 months where I don't see him at all because he gets up in the morning and 4 o'clock in the morning and gets home and basically crashes and goes. But this past year, I was able to witness I was up here a couple times when you were working on that. But have you seen him with the harvest beard? He doesn't shave during that time. I'm not really sure if he washes his clothing during that time. It's unclear.
I take a bath 1 time a month, whether I need it or not.
But if you go in the reserve room, there's a picture that's up there where it's during harvest time, and I don't know what he looks like a mad scientist, but that really is what it's like. He's, if you go in the lab where he's doing his blending and when he's doing during that harvest time, it's like he's got, the hair sticking straight up and the beard and his spiral notebook with the handwriting that only he can read. And I'm not even convinced you can read it most of the time, and it's stained with the...
This Chardonnay was supposed to be Cabernet, actually. It is proprietary. Kim, do you have a question?
I do, just real quick. At what point do you decide which barrel that you're going to use when you're kind of going through the process and you're tasting the barrels? Because I noticed you go from like 8 months in the barrel to 20 months in the barrel, but how do you determine when you're going to use it and which barrels you're going to use?
Another good question. And really, some of the most fun I have as a human being is being in what I call the cathedral, our barrel storage area. And generally what happens with all of our wines is, once wines go through malolactic fermentation, which generally happens, let's say, anywhere from January to April, depending upon whether it's white or red, and depending upon when the grapes are actually harvested. After ML's done, you get a kind of a clearer picture about what the wine is and hopefully where it's going to go. And I taste blind as much as I possibly can, so I don't want to be influenced by which barrels I have in front of me, which coopers, historically which barrels I've liked a lot. I want to kind of come into each experience fresh, so that I can let that wine talk to me and tell me whether it's a wine of A quality, a wine of B quality, or C quality, or what have you. So I'll taste from barrel, and I'll write in my notebook, what I'm smelling, what I'm tasting, what I'm feeling in the mouth, and I'll give, grades in my notebook, and I'll chalk on the barrel kind of what I think. Is it an A barrel? Is it a plus barrel? Is it a neutral plus minus barrel? It all depends upon, what I'm feeling that day. And so I'll go through the barrels numerous times, though, to arrive at a conclusion about where we stand.
It's great when I'm a teacher, so I'm in the classroom dealing with 9-year-olds all day, and he's barrel surfing. That's his job. So I'm in a classroom with 31 kids.
Soon to be an Olympic sport, by the way.
And he's, it's tough to feel sorry for him at the end of the day when we get home. What did you do today? Oh, well, I broke up a fight, and I tried to teach a kid how to read, and he's like, what did you do today? I tasted a bunch of wine.
Barrel surfing for 12 hours.
It's really serious. It's really important.
Barrel surfing for 12 hours is a lot harder to teach a kid to read, believe me. They'll eventually read by themselves. I'm just kidding. I have the utmost respect for teachers. An incredibly difficult job. Thank you for letting me do this, by the way.
We could have a day where we switch.
God. Pity the children.
So I started working in the tasting room in April, and I went to my first staff meeting, which happened once a year. They do this, and it was my first staff meeting. That in here, they split you up into teams, and you're given, raw material wines to blend for the harvest blend that you guys, I know you're probably familiar with this if you've been with us for a long time. They sell a specific harvest blend that goes towards
Breast cancer
breast
research.
cancer
Yeah.
research. So I was on the ringer team with Cindy, right? And we blended and we won. So I came home and I was like, you better watch out. I got you.
I told her I can't teach, so hopefully the wine's not as good as I think it's going to be. But Certo, when Certo comes out in September,
My team.
That'll be June's team that created that blend.
It's not a bad staff meeting. Again, getting back to my teacher staff meetings are not like
Not
that.
the same kind of
We have
staff
never blended wine at a staff meeting.
We can do it. Yeah. Another question?
Yeah, I had a question kind of going back in history now. The difference between the 99 and the 03, significant to me, the kind of caramel, the oak, the vanilla flavor and the aroma that we got in the 2003. And then you sort of addressed that with the aging and the cork. But was there something different in the process, or is that strictly due to aging? We kind of lost all of those nuances.
God, it's interesting. There are so many different ways that a single choice will impact what the final blend tastes like. So I could say to you, age of the wine, 4 years difference, right? 99 and 03. Mm-hmm. Different barrels, different year. 03 was an incredibly hot vintage in California. In fact, that was the year that tens of thousands of French folk died because it was so hot in Europe that year. And it was one of those years that you can see now if you have big high-end California cabs from 03, those wines are way over the top. They just really reflect the vintage a lot. So you have the vintage variation, you've got age, you've got a bottle under cork, which may or may not be a good way to store things, right? So you've got all those variables. You've got different vineyards. You've got different age of vines. You've got all of these variables that go in. You've got a guy with 4 years more experience winemaking than he did with the first wine. So it's almost a wonder that they taste it all similarly. That they taste like Chardonnay.
Right.
The variables really are, I think, more a function of age. What you're seeing now, though, you're seeing what oxygen in the bottle and this kind of transpiration through the cork will give you over time. Okay. But all those other factors are immensely important in terms of giving.
I just
you
wondered
the
if you were changing your style between the vintages.
No,
but I guess you have to depending on the vintage, right?
Well, the vintage will certainly a lot sort of micro changes, but not really macro. Things have been pretty status quo for the last 15 years or so, stylistically. Thank you. We have just a couple minutes left, but we want to show this.
So this has been the concept behind this was a vertical of Merrillie Chardonnay and also kind of a vertical historically of Merrillie the person, and we would be remiss if we didn't talk about her and her later years. There are not as many pictures as there are of her in the early years. There are not a lot of pictures of her after she got married. If you read the things that both Francine, so she had 2 children, Francine and Steve Sr., Stephen's dad, that were born. She was married in 36, had her first, is that right? 30, no, is that right? 38. 38, had her, in August of 38, had her first child in August of 39, and then Steve Sr. in 41. So she packed a lot into some, just a few years, and unfortunately,
this is sort of the Earth Mother kind of quality that we see in
they talk about her.
videos.
Apparently, she was suffering from Hodgkin's disease, which I guess today she would have lived, but at that time they didn't have the cure. So for 7 years she was struggling with the illness, and the kids were unaware really about how sick she was. So they talk about how they'd come home from school and she was larger than life and had these home cooked meals and would take them out, and they always had fun. But what they didn't know is that at home, well, all the time that they were at school, she was sick and in bed for 7 years. And Steve Sr., all these years later, he's still, obviously she had such an impact on his life, and it's as a mom of 4 kids, I can't imagine
what that would be like.
what that would be like.
What the kids would be as well. We are just about to wrap it up. I hope you all enjoyed the experience today. Getting a chance to revisit some old friends from a wine standpoint and to learn more about the family, learn more about why we do the things that we do, why it's meaningful for us. And I want to thank my lovely and courageous co-host for dropping in.
You'll pay. You'll pay.
I want to thank Didier and Susan for coming on down to Livermore and helping us celebrate from home, as it were, and Tracy and Jennifer and Janice for helping get everybody wine and putting this event on. And this is something that we feel really strongly about. Hope to do again down the road. Hope you all had a great time. ToutSuite.com. You can see the playback online. You'll see some things that won't appear on the live stream. But ToutSuite Social Club is a very cool thing.
And StephenKent.com.
And StephenKent.com.
No.
So, yeah.
I'm just saying.
I wish I knew how to sell wine. That's the second half of my career, is learning how to sell wine. But again, thank you all for being here, and we hope to see you all again soon. Come to Livermore. It's a spectacular place, really Renaissance, one of the great new wine regions. That's an old wine region, but I think you'll have a lot of fun. Come on the weekends. You'll see a bunch of great wineries, a lot of fun downtown here. This is really a burgeoning place and a historically important place to be a part of. But again, thank you very much for being here. We hope to see you online sometime soon. StephenKent.com, ToutSuite.com. Come and join us. Everything.com.
Everything.com.
Thank you. Thank you.